Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Welcome back to The Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildebrand. Joining me as always, that beautiful mountain of a man, Dan Rubenstein. Sir, welcome back. How are you, my friend?
Glad to be back, Ty. I'm wonderful. We're talking about the Big Ten. We're talking about 38 teams, however many teams we're talking about in the Big Ten. We have a lot of interesting things, fascinating things, intriguing items to discuss. You've got your ding finger. That's a weird way to phrase it. At the ready.
I do have a ding finger. It's a little weird, but I like it. Continue.
In any case, what's better than preview season? It's the potential energy before the storm. I love it.
And you're in Big Ten country, so you've really got your finger on the pulse of all things Northwestern football at the moment.
As we know this. I have Roger Sherman's phone number. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, welcome back in. We've now done a bunch of previews, right? We've done the Pac-12 and the Big 12. We didn't intend to do them on back-to-back episodes, but I guess in light of circumstances, it kind of makes sense that we would bolt those two together. Yeah. Earlier in the week, we dropped the ACC preview, and now it is all things Big Ten, Daniel. I've got the Big Ten East. You've got the Big Ten West. And again,
my goodness, how interesting, how bizarre.
How interesting, how fascinating, how bizarre. That is our framework for all of our previews this season. We had 29 interesting things on the last two episodes. We'll see what number we get up to. You heard the ding a moment ago every time we talk about a fascinating thing. Maybe not every time, but here and there, I'm going to be playing the ding, and I'm going to be doing my best to keep track of how many interesting and fascinating things we discuss, kind of like around the horn style. It's a bit arbitrary.
Yeah.
I think it's the best way to characterize this, but we're trying to keep track as best we can. And folks have really responded well to the new framework for our previews. Don't forget to go on out to verballers.com. That's where you can play our preseason game. We're calling it Grand Total. You pick the over-under for each of 69 Power 5 schools. Gotten good response to that as well. So if, as you mentioned, Dan, if you're not a scaredy cat.
Oh my God, the S word, Ty.
If you're not a scaredy cat, and if you want to compete, if you feel like you've got what it takes to compete with the Verballerhood, come on in. Compete for a prize pack against the Verballerhood. Otherwise, stay away. That's your prerogative. But if you like competition, if you're not afraid of competition.
If you don't shy away from competition,
come on in, verballers.com. If not, hey, no harm, no foul. Make sure you hit subscribe or follow on the podcast and tell your friends as well. If you want to leave a star rating or review, that is always appreciated, Dan. Shall we dive in here and talk about all things Big Ten?
I'm ready.
Let's start where we've been starting. Big picture.
Yes.
Big picture fascination points with the Big Ten for you.
The novelty. The newness of the Big Ten this year, both in terms of what eventually will be new next year, but that's neither here nor there for this preview. Right. But new quarterbacks, new head coaches, new systems, new old situations where you have the old Illinois defensive coordinator moving over to become the new head coach at Purdue. It's not as swingy, I would say, when we talked about the ACC with the movement across the conference, but new full-time quarterbacks, new coordinators, new head coaches at big places that, you're almost positive. I'm almost positive. You kind of understand what the ceilings are going to be just because of how these teams appear to be built. But still, I like the new. We've had long, and by the way, a new head coach in Michigan for the first few games, apparently. But in terms of how long the quarterback position has been filled with a very specific Sean Clifford at Penn State, or, how long CJ Stroud has been a mainstay at Ohio State, and the Scott Frost stories seem to last forever at Nebraska, that it feels like, you just mentioned, you took yourself a shower before this show just to clear your head. It feels like the Big Ten took an off-season shower, and I mean that in a positive way. Obviously, there's the Northwestern situation, but that to me is the big thing that I come down with.
Yeah, look, the top of the Big Ten is absolutely loaded.
Sure.
The top is loaded between Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State. That three-headed monster in and of itself, I think, is fascinating and will be interesting to watch. Clearly, it is Michigan and Ohio State a rung above Penn State, if we're being honest. But Penn State is kind of right there, and I could talk through that in a little bit more detail. But after that, I think you've got a rung of, let's say, Iowa and Wisconsin, Maryland, and Illinois. Those 4 teams feel like they're about even to me. And then everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nuance. There's nuance. Across the board in the Big Ten, it is super interesting. The other point that I would mention, point 3, if the Pac-12 is the quarterback conference, the Big Ten might be the non-quarterback
also
conference.
True. Yeah.
Right? Because you've got JJ McCarthy, I think, at the very top. And then...
Well, in terms of proven experience.
Proven commodities.
Yeah.
After him, is it Tanner Mordecai? Is it Talia Tungavailoa? In terms of proven entities, there really aren't a whole lot of established quarterbacks in the Big Ten. I think that makes it fascinating.
I think it's Talia. Who else would it be? Who else is in that
Tanner
conversation?
Mordecai, he's been pretty good. I don't know.
But that's new school, new offense at that school, new surroundings. I'm scrolling through the quarterbacks in the I guess it depends on how thoroughly you've thought about Luke Altmaier. Gavin Wimsatt, whatever. Yeah.
It really is thin at the top.
Yes, but you know what? By the end of the season, it might be, Kyle McCord and Drew Allarm, right? That are 1-2 for all we know. So yes, because of the absence of a known commodity at Penn State and Ohio State, that's where we stand today.
Why don't we start with the Michigan Wolverines?
Let's do it.
Let's start with Michigan. Michigan, of course, went up until the playoff game against TCU before they lost, and that was a game that they very easily could have won. 51-45 was the final score. Not a lot wrong with this team. Not a lot wrong with that team. Certainly not a lot wrong with this team.
Right.
One of the other, I guess, higher level points of intrigue is the fact that some of the top guns in the league have a lot back.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State all have a lot back, and that's part of why I think there's so much excitement at the very top of the Big Ten. JJ McCarthy, a bit of a revelation last year for Michigan. I think we were doubtful.
Yeah.
Initially, we thought maybe there would be some growing pains with him. There were a few yippee moments where he did the tech bubble thing where he just runs back and back and back and tries to make a play, waits for somebody to get open. But they drilled that out of him pretty quickly, and he ended up being super clutch down the stretch.
Yeah, I would say
really big
still
throws.
Some processing questions against TCU, holding onto the ball maybe a little bit too long, but otherwise, yeah, there's you're nitpicking, I think, with the Michigan offense with how successful it was, for sure.
Absolutely. The heart of this team, though, is the trenches.
Yeah.
The heart of this team is the trenches. Coming into this season, it's the best returning offensive line. They've also got Blake Corum, who comes back from injury. He ran for nearly 1,500 odd yards and 18 touchdowns before he got hurt. Donovan Edwards stepped in, came in strong when he had to late in the season, but it is going to be that two-headed monster of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. The fascinating thing to me, frankly, is that most of the team is back.
Yeah.
And you don't see that a lot for playoff contenders or teams that were in the playoffs or just teams at this level. You rarely have it where this many guys are back.
Yeah.
And so fourth in returning production on offense, 14th in returning production on defense. Those numbers are just, as I said, ridiculously high. Given their style of play, which is very dependent on that line and the power rush that Jim Harbaugh has, in effect, gone back to, it's really hard to see any kind of significant drop-off. Would you agree with that?
I think that's likely correct. The question, okay, so Jim Harbaugh is likely out. I don't know when we're recording this if everything is certain, but the first third of the season, wild.
Right. 4 games, the first 4 of the games, first 4 games, they don't really play anybody. Right. I'll get into the schedule here in a little bit. The suspension, of course, due to some false statements that he apparently gave investigators from the NCAA. Right. We can kind of address that here in kind, but I don't think that has any great impact, certainly not on the meat of the schedule, which isn't until later in the year.
Yeah, so 2 new full-time coordinators with the departure on both sides, both in terms of finding a new job and also weird computer allegations or what was proven. So that was Matt Weiss, I believe, on offense. And so it's Sharon Moore taking over the offensive line coach, co-coordinators now taking over the offense. So I'm sure we're going to see more of the same because why would you change it significantly, especially if JJ McCarthy, in terms of processing speed, takes that next step? No reason to think he won't because physically the talent is ridiculous. So what they've done at the skill positions, what they've done recruiting, and that was the question before with receiver and tight end and running back depth of really true playoff winter wonder types. They have that. They absolutely have that.
They do.
So to me, the question more is if that's the system they're running, and they lost Biff Poggi, the new Charlotte head coach, who was sort of shadow head coach with Jim Harbaugh last year. The question to me is just is the focus there? Do they risk losing some of those, not 50-50 games, but sloppier performances that, they weren't always separating themselves from clearly lesser teams last year? They struggled in the red zone a little bit. It's just, to me, it's just a week-to-week focus thing because, I don't know, making the playoff 3 consecutive years, winning the Big Ten 3 years in a row, not an easy task with Penn State and Ohio State.
No, I mean, my big question, I guess, with teams that have to play Michigan is how many can really match up with them? In all honesty, how many can match up with this style?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're going to be so physical up front. They're going to beat your brains in by running the football. You're looking at a very small handful of teams: Ohio State, Penn State. Who has the line? Iowa, Illinois is pretty good up front.
Yeah.
When you're that loaded, when you're this loaded, as Michigan is along the lines, you're pretty well insulated from some of those fluctuations that tend to gobble up other teams. And it can still happen. It's college football. It almost did happen last year against Illinois, for being honest. But it just, to me, it seems more unlikely this season, given where they're at, given all the veteran leadership that they've got coming back. In a sense, the boredom with Michigan is the fascination.
Right.
And if you're a Michigan fan, of course, you're thrilled. This is kind of what it feels like to root for Georgia or Alabama, where every year they've established such a high baseline that you, in effect, know what you're going to get, at least the worst case scenario, know what you're going to get. So I think it's Donovan Edwards. I think it's Blake Corum eating heartily on the ground because that's going to be the focal point of this offense. Mm-hmm. Even if there are injuries up front, as you said, like Michigan is crazy deep with offensive linemen at this point. It's taking a while.
Yeah, and they're hitting more in the portal too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they've just been so astute when it comes to building up that side of the ball that provided JJ McCarthy can build a rapport with his guys out wide, which I don't know if he does, that probably plays him into a first round pick in the NFL draft. It just feels like so much is going in the right direction for Michigan. I haven't even mentioned the defense yet. Dan.
Right.
Maisie Smith, DJ Turner, Mike Morris. I think I got the big guns that are drafted now and no longer playing for the team. However, the cupboard is so stocked. 9 of their top 12 tacklers are back. This is basically a defense that is returning in kind.
Mm-hmm.
So just not a lot really to look at and split hairs over. Like JJ McCarthy is going to be better. The line's going to be the best in college football. The running back tandem might be the best in college football. And so long as Michigan just continues to do what it did really well the last 2 seasons, and we have no reason to think that they can't do it all over again, this is at least an 11-win team.
Yeah.
This might be a 12-win team. This is easily a playoff contender, easily a conference contender to get back to that conference championship game.
Yeah, and I don't know who, by the way, this would be, but if there is that defense, I guess, before Penn State, which is the third to final week of the season, something like that. If there is a defense that forces Michigan into a more aerial game on offense, then it's a question of I think Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson are the expected 2 big names at receiver, and they're starting over again a little bit at full-time tight end starter. It's where is the dependable game changer at receiver? Cornelius Johnson would sort of not show up for 7 straight weeks or something like that. Then I think he had the big games against definitely against Ohio State over the top.
Yeah.
But who is that receiver that can take a hitch, 27 yards, that is going to be able to stretch defenses or keep safeties back? That can Michigan win in 2 or 3 different ways? Can they win in 2 or 3 different ways if forced to? And that's the big qualifier, because
it's the qualifier.
Before Penn State, the best of Minnesota maybe, but we'll get to them. Their defense isn't probably going to be where it's been the past couple of years. Who can force that element of Michigan's offense?
I mean, what we saw with Michigan a lot last year was there was a little bit of a crockpot situation where they would just grind you down along the lines. And then especially in the second half of the Ohio State game, when they won that half 28-3, they were able to start popping big plays because of the run, because of the threat of the run. JJ McCarthy had a bunch of big plays, and that ultimately took down Ohio State. They did the same thing It happened earlier, but they basically did the same thing against Penn State as well. They just wear you down so much. They play such a specific brand of football that it takes a specific team, I think, in order to knock them off. You could not ask for more in terms of the schedule either. We already talked about the first 4 games: East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, and Rutgers. Right. Jim Harbaugh, his presence will probably not be that missed. They'll be just fine. After that, though, here are their road games: at Nebraska, at Minnesota, at Michigan State, at Penn State, and at Maryland. Those feel workable. Again, with the way that this team plays, not dependent on the pass at all, though JJ McCarthy can clearly throw it and made big throws last year. But that running game and that offensive line will travel. So I feel pretty good about that slate. As we get into November, that's when it gets interesting, right? They're on the road at Penn State. They got to come back home last week of the year against Ohio State. We can talk about the Buckeyes next. But look, if you are a Michigan Wolverines fan, and I think there is good reason that the Michigan people talked about this all offseason long, they are setting their sights down on Georgia. They are making their offseason mantra to beat Georgia because they feel like they obviously play a similar brand of football to Georgia. Maybe they're not quite as loaded on offense, but they feel like they play a similar enough brand. They feel like they've gotten the formula down, and they feel like they could have been in that title game if not for a few breaks that went against them. So if you're a Michigan fan, like, sky's the limit.
Do you get the sense that Michigan, either internally or the fan base expectation is they've been working to this year, that this is the targeted year? I think they have Ohio State and Ann Arbor, yes?
In Ann Arbor,
so it's the Ohio State game is in Ann Arbor. They've got a quarterback who is now in his 3rd season playing, 2nd starting. The offensive line is deep. The defense is filled with star power. Will Johnson, by the way, or even like the Will Johnson, Marvin Harrison Jr. matchup at the end of the year might be the best one-on-one of the season in the sport. I love Will Johnson, and it's still Mike Sanders still on the other side. I think he's been there for a good amount of time. But it feels like 2023 is the targeted year for Michigan, schedule-wise, roster-wise. And then look, if you're talking about playoff comparisons, Georgia trying to go for 3 in a row, but starting over at a number of key places, including quarterback. Same goes for Alabama. Same goes for Ohio State, where at least going into the season, Michigan seems to have a leg up in terms of roster construction and experience that, if not now, when for Michigan, right? That's interesting to me about the Wolverines.
Completely agree. I think, again, the boredom's a fascination, and there is nuance within that.
Sure.
There are several interesting things that make Michigan just very, very intriguing. A very intriguing story to follow. It's just so rare that you get this many guys back from such a good team. And I think that's why I'm so excited to see what they can do. Not excited as a Penn State fan.
Right.
But just excited as a college football fan, someone who does this show. They'll be stocked and ready to roll. And if you want, I can go right into Ohio State.
Well, I was going to go with the champions of the West. Speaking of Michigan, the Purdue Boilermakers, Ty.
Let's do the Spoilermakers, Dan. New coach. New
quarterback. The Hudson Card era begins.
Yeah, okay.
Look, you earn your way to the top, and Purdue earned their way to the top of this preview last year in a very weird West year. Which year isn't, by the way? Quickly, I mean, there's a good amount to talk about with Purdue, I suppose. They hired Ryan Walters, who fielded, by the way, the number 2 national points per drive defense last season. Any guess as to who number 1 was?
Number 1 points per drive defense? Georgia.
Iowa. They both, number 1 and number 2, emerged from the Big Ten West. Please ignore the offenses played. Please ignore the offenses that help to create the 1 and 2 rankings. Purdue hires Ryan Walters, young, well thought of. He brings over Graham Harrell.
That was going to be my question for you.
That's my fascinating item for Purdue. Hitching your wagon.
I was going to ask you about that because we just did the Pitt preview.
Yeah.
We did the Pitt preview last episode. And we brought up Graham Harrell. It's like, woo, the tone in the room, the virtual room here.
Right.
With you and I recording, that tone changes in a hurry.
Was he at Pitt? Am I going crazy? He was at West Virginia.
West Virginia, I'm sorry.
Oh, my God. You just made 2 fan bases.
Please forgive me, guys. Forgive me.
Upset. Yeah, it's never great. Look, maybe he is looking for the fit. Maybe it just hasn't been a fit with West Virginia, wasn't a fit with USC, certainly at the end. But when you leave a wake of disappointed fan bases, It's not great. Okay, so I still like the talent of Hudson Card. He clearly wasn't the guy at Texas, and maybe that new start will help him out. Devin Mockabee really flashed last year as I believe he was a freshman at running back for a program that really struggled running the ball before Mockabee got an opportunity. They're so at receiver, I would say. I don't think there's obvious star power at the moment after really long stretches of star power for Purdue at receiver. They should be good at tight end. They look like they're going to have a decent offensive line. So I think they're pretty well set up for Graham Harrell. The fascinating point is still like this offensive shift, but I don't even know if it's that much of an offensive shift. It was a lot of short stuff in the passing game under Jeff Brom. I still think it's going to be a lot of short stuff in the passing game for Hudson Card and Graham Harrell together. The defense is going to take a bit. They're decent at linebacker, but otherwise they're pretty thin, and their schedule is wild. The fascinating thing me
it's tough
is Ryan Walters' welcome to head coaching in the Big Ten, because that's it to me. It's opening up against Fresno and then a string early mid-year of Wisconsin, Illinois, at Iowa and Ohio State, and then later soon after, 4 minutes later, at Nebraska, at Michigan, Minnesota, and they've got the Old Oaken Bucket at home. So if you're a West team going on the road to Iowa, going on the road to Michigan and Ohio State, obviously they play Iowa every year, but it's a tough lot. And so I'm going to go out on a limb and say Purdue is not going to repeat as champions of the Western Division, but I'm fascinated to see Hudson Card operate at a new place with hopefully some more defensive help than he had a couple years ago when he was thrown into the mix at Texas for a longer time. Well, both last year and the year before. So we'll see.
Purdue's over-under is 5.5, and right now the public is crushing the under.
I kind of like it. It's just
you like the over or you like the
under?
Yeah, I do too. It's a tough schedule. Anytime you're drawing from the West, anytime you're drawing both Ohio State and Michigan, that's almost unfair, especially if you're Purdue with a new coach. And let's be honest, there is a little bit of a rebuild going on here at the moment. So it just seems like that's not a great setup, even if we like Ryan Walters.
Yeah.
I like Ryan Walters. I think he was a good hire. It just might take a little bit to kind of reconstitute things now with, given the setup.
Can I truffle hunt for you really quick about Purdue? Because tough schedule, a lot of new faces, not a lot of new pieces. There's one specific guy that I'm very excited about. There's another Karlaftis. There's another Karlaftis tie.
Yes.
And his name...
There is another.
His name is Yanni. Yanni Karlaftis at linebacker, sophomore.
Do we have a Yanni sound? We got to get a Yanni sound.
Hopefully he's a star so we can make a big deal about it. But there is a new Karlaftis in West Lafayette, so that's fun.
I'm jotting this down.
Please
Yanni
do.
sound.
Yanni Karlaftis.
ASAP. Mm-hmm. There is another.
YANNI was a redshirt freshman last year.
Yanni. Mm-hmm. I love it. Oh, God. Okay, where next?
All right, you want to go to Ohio State?
I would love to.
Let's do that tandem
of
Michigan and Ohio State near the top.
I would love to do that, Dan. Yeah. So, look, Ohio State's in a similar position as Michigan because they made the playoff a year ago as well. 11-2 was their final record. They lost in heartbreaking fashion to Georgia. They basically played Georgia to a draw. If you look at the stats, it was an even game against Georgia. And they were up 14 with 10 minutes left, and they ended up losing 42-41. So I want you to keep that in perspective. Despite all the hand-wringing about getting drilled by Michigan in consecutive years, this is still obviously an incredible team.
Yeah.
And maybe the only team all season that laid a glove on Georgia, the two-time defending national champions.
Right there.
They led 20-17, as I said earlier, over Michigan as well in the game. So it's not like Ohio State is on an entirely different plane from what we're perceiving as the best in college football. They're right there with them. It was just the big play thing. The big pass problem is what I've got as my point of fascination.
Okay.
Because they're loaded on both sides of the ball. It's an embarrassment of riches. It's also striking, as an aside, how few seniors project as like starters in this system. 7 of 22, by my count, are seniors or grad transfers.
Well, the good ones go pro,
students.
but yeah.
The good ones go pro. The good ones will go pro after this year. I think there'll be a lot of turnover afoot after 2023. The defense will be a little better. I think the offense will be a little bit worse. But by and large, they're going to be really good. They're going to be really good, and they're going to be in this conversation all year. Honestly, if it weren't for a few big pass plays last year, explosive pass plays, this is a much different conversation about Ohio State this year. There's a few plays that got them. It's a few plays. JJ McCarthy hit 3 of them in the second half of that game, all of which went for more than 40 yards. And that was why they lost to Michigan. Then Stetson Bennett had the long one to start the comeback in the playoff game. So you stop a few of those, and I think Ohio State, you can make a case that Ohio State's the defending national champion. It's not a lot that they need to fix here, in my view.
Okay.
Defense is loaded. I sense from what you said there that you don't fully agree.
I mean, you could make the case that Ohio State is the defending national champion.
Well, not now. But if a few things go in their direction in the playoff game, maybe otherwise.
Okay.
If they stop a few more of those big plays, then maybe it's a much different conversation right now. They were good enough to be in that championship game. Maybe they should have.
Look, if Notre Dame stopped a few more plays, they probably would have beaten Marshall.
You're gonna give me the if wheels I'm a bicycle
right,
thing.
right.
I know.
Like
I know.
this is.
I know.
This
It's
is the
fine.
sport.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I just don't feel like they're that far off.
No, of course. No, they're
not far off. They weren't far off.
Played Georgia more impressively than any other team.
The defense returns 77% of its production. 10 guys earned some form of all Big Ten honors, which is nuts. Just think about that. They only play 11 guys. 10 of them earned all Big Ten honors in some capacity. Tommy Eichenberg, Steel Chambers, those are the linebackers that are, I think, kind of quarterbacking the defense. Both are back. JT Tuimoloau.
Yeah.
Did I say that
You did
right?
a good job from Washington, yeah.
Tuimoloau.
Close enough.
I'm really bad at these names. I apologize.
Okay.
I'm trying. He's obviously a force up front
JTT.
and made his name. JTT. Thank you. I like it. This is going to be year 2 under Jim Knowles. I think the pass rush is going to get better. The front 7 obviously is going to be incredible based on the names that I rattled off there. I don't fully know what to make of the secondary. And that presents a little bit of a conflict because I know that the big pass problem is the thing that they got to fix. It's Ohio State. They've got guys, plenty of depth, obviously. It's just not as proven as I think the rest of the defense. So that's the one thing that I am watching. I do think, though, the defense as a whole will get better. It's year 2 under Jim Knowles. They took a huge step forward last season. For the most part, it was just a few things that ultimately got in their way. The interesting thing, though, another interesting thing on Ohio State's side, we're up to 9 points and only 3 teams here. The schedule. Schedule's kind of challenging.
I agree.
This season. On the road at Notre Dame, they got Wisconsin on the road. They got Michigan on the road. They're home against Penn State. All of those teams are going to throw it. And so the reason I bring it up right now is because if they don't get the secondary and the big pass problem sorted out, then perhaps this is something we could see more of. Could be something that gets stuck in their craw. Another point of fascination, I won't ding it again. We're up to 10 points already. This is crazy. But not so much a question of skill talent on offense. It's Ohio State. They've got the best receiver room in the country with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming. They're going to be very good. Nobody can cover them. But it is a quarterback thing. Like, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Kyle McCord? Is it going to be Devin Brown? I thought they would have named Kyle McCord by now. It sounds like Ryan Day is going to take that all the way into the fall.
Okay.
Kyle McCord's got more experience. He gained more experience in actual gameplay. He also gained more experience in the spring because Devin Brown hurt his hand. But we'll find out more about who that guy is going to be. Whoever it is will obviously have weapons to throw to. They'll have backs behind them. The line needs to be a little bit reconstituted. They lose 3 starters. But at this point, with the way that Ryan Day has the offense humming, you could probably start a cardboard cutout at quarterback and still get, top 20 level caliber performance. Yep. Ohio State is going to score points. Guys will get open. Whoever the quarterback is going to have good numbers. So look, I'm splitting hairs here by talking about one specific stat that continuously came back and got Ohio State in the butt last year.
Ooh.
The schedule is a bit challenging, but I feel like they've got the horses, and it ultimately is going to come down to a few games this year. It's going to come down to the Michigan game. It's going to come down to the Penn State game, probably the Notre Dame game, and maybe Wisconsin to some extent. Wisconsin's probably going to throw it with Tanner Mordecai, but like if you're an Ohio State fan, it comes down to beating Michigan and maybe winning a playoff game. Otherwise, that anything short of that is probably a disappointment.
Well, yeah, anything short of winning the Big Ten is a disappointment for sure.
Yeah, of course.
And not making the playoff is always going to be a disappointment for Ohio State. I mean, the fascinating thing to me with Ohio State, again, I think I echo what you say, that the quarterback situation will be fine just because of how advantaged whoever that quarterback is will be with the running backs next to him, with the receivers and tight end, Cade Stoverback, right, that he's throwing to. The offensive line is kind of new, right? They're replacing 2 or 3 full-time guys, but a lot have played.
There's enough there that it's not a full rebuild like we're going to talk about with Maryland. Okay,
right.
It's just these are things on different levels altogether. They will be fine up front, but I think it would be foolish to expect it's going to perform at the same level as last year. Maybe a slight step back at worst.
Yeah. So the thing to me is probably with Ohio State that is still the concern is the secondary, just because, and I guess the word would be islands. They were especially bad when they were manned up by Penn State guys, by Michigan guys, by Georgia guys, if that's who you're measuring yourself against, because Ohio State dudes got pressure in this new defense. They got to the quarterback. And so it was a lot of issues with letting guys get behind you or losing those 50-50 balls against the more talented guys on the better teams, just to see, because Denzel Burke is back, and Proctor
back,
and Ransom, they're back. They're good players, but it's just, are they going to be put in better position, and are they going to be better when finding themselves on islands against Cornelius Johnson, right? Against,
right.
I don't have Penn State's receiver room in front of me. I always forget who's on Penn State, who's still
Dante
around. Cephas, right. Guys like that, because they did
Keandre Lambert Brown. Yeah.
They did give up plays last year, and the game started very well for Ohio State last year, but Penn State made a ton of plays. Last year was Parker Washington, and so are they able to smother a little bit more this year? That to me is huge.
Keandre Lambert Smith. I said Lambert Brown. I apologize. Okay. I'm yelling here.
You're good.
I feel great about Ohio State. Their over-under is 10.5. I don't know if I would take the over on that, frankly.
Okay.
I don't know if I would go there with it. They obviously have the players that can win 12 games. The quarterback thing, we'll wait and see on that one.
Arguably the most gravitational player in college football, Marvin Harrison Jr. Yeah. They're in a great spot.
I'm not saying they won't hit that over, by the way. I'm just saying I would not bet it personally.
Okay.
But
next team.
Let's go to Wisconsin.
Let's do that.
I want to talk Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin is crazy fascinating this year. So after all those years basically running the same system, Wisconsin decided no mas. They're going to take things in a drastically different direction. Not so much by hiring Luke Fickell, who I think is a perfect fit for Wisconsin, but they bring in Phil Longo from North Carolina. They bring up Tanner Mordecai as a transfer. Are they going to throw it now? Is this going to be a new era of Wisconsin football where they just air it out and go completely counter to what they've been all these years?
I think it'll look different. I think they're going to spread out more. I think they're going to play with more tempo. But if you remember what Phil Longo did at North Carolina 2020, Michael Carter and Javonte Williams, 1,000-yard rushers. Yeah. So I think there's going to be a good amount of balance. And there should be a good amount of balance because of what Wisconsin returns up front. And depending on who you ask, Tanner Mordecai's spring was mostly good, but still getting used to it, still, transitioning away from SMU. I think they're going to be in a very good place on offense. It might take a little bit of time. It's going to take a little time. But I think I'm high on Wisconsin's offense. It really is, and the fascinating thing to me is it's an offense on the fly with so many moving pieces, new coordinator, new system, new head coach, new quarterback. They bring in a bunch of, I'm not going to say like dudes, but guys at receiver. They simply needed the bodies because they didn't recruit to have like a 6-7 receiver rotation in the way that they probably will moving forward. And they have the luxury of Braelon Allen on offense, which is you start out with a promising offensive line in Braelon Allen. You're ahead of a lot of teams. You just are.
No.
And so Wisconsin will find some roadblocks as they try to transition, but I'm high on this ceiling, this by mid-season ceiling for this Wisconsin offense. I'm a little bit more worried about, and this is very strange to say, about the Wisconsin defense.
Okay.
And it's just because of what they lose up front on defense. And because of the turnover on defense and, I think the defensive line, it's not something to worry about, but it feels more unproven than usual. The linebacking core is in a good spot. They're a little bit thin at corners, so you might need to see more outscoring than usual. Maybe some more 31-28 type Wisconsin games. But the reality with Wisconsin, with all of that, is there's nothing really losable until week 6. And that there's an Iowa, at Illinois, Ohio State, all in a row, and then they finish with Nebraska and at Minnesota with the Axe game. But we've made mention of this before. Relatively speaking, this is as ideal a first-year schedule for Luke Fickell in Wisconsin as one could hope, given the teams, given where those teams are, given where those games are. Like, I want to pump the brakes a little bit because I know you talked about 10-win potential just because the schedule, not necessarily with how Wisconsin was built, but I'd like to see a little bit more depth on defense. But that's Luke Fickell and Mike Tressel. That's the calling card.
Does it surprise you that Jim Leonhard didn't get that gig as defensive coordinator?
I think so, but I also think it was recognized that it was probably time for a bit of a reboot. That would have been the old move, and so the old move and the old progression didn't sort of hit a snag. And so with having Luke Fickell nearby, with having him as proven as he obviously is now with what he did at Cincinnati, I thought it was gutsy in as much as it can be when hiring Luke Fickell's a no-brainer if he's going to come to you. But yeah, a little bit surprised, but still on the younger side, and Wisconsin is a major place. Who knows? Who knows what happened behind the scenes?
I'm looking at the DraftKings over-under lines right now. You can get over 8.5 Wisconsin right now. Looking at this schedule, that feels like a damn near lock to me.
Mm-hmm.
Again, here are the road games.
Yeah.
Wazoo, Purdue, Illinois, Indiana, and Minnesota. Those are the road games. Now, Wazoo, okay, maybe there's a little bit of weirdness there, and who knows what to expect out of Purdue. Illinois should have a pretty good defensive line, if nothing more. And I'm intrigued by Indiana, though I don't think they're going to beat Wisconsin.
Right.
Home games, Iowa, Ohio State, Northwestern, Nebraska. The only game on here that really frightens me is Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're saying there's 2 other losses on there and you still hit the over, I kind of love the over Wisconsin, to be honest.
I think so too. I always hesitate.
You want
to
pump the brakes.
I always hesitate a little with so much new. But yeah, it shapes up really nicely for them. If Tanner Mordecai continues apace. Now, it was in the American. Yeah. It's a different situation. But he's played big teams. He's won big games. Yeah. I don't hate it. I'm just not getting near it.
Interesting. Do you like the Luke Fickell hire as much as I do?
Yeah, of course. Definitely. Yeah.
It feels like a no-brainer.
I think he's going to recruit smartly. I think he's going to recruit well. I think there are going to be more blue-chip offensive linemen, running backs, defensive players overall, especially at linebacker, given where Wisconsin's situated geographically. I think he is going to maximize Wisconsin. Now, could that mean losing to Ohio State or Michigan every year in the Big Ten championship? It could. It absolutely could. But I think he's going to build this team to the point where if there is a flaw, if there is a weakness, if Jim Harbaugh leaves, if Ryan Day leaves or is fired or whatever, Wisconsin's never going to be positioned to become the new power in the conference, but in the correct year, yeah, there's Wisconsin in a 12-team playoff. Absolutely.
The Big Ten West, I think, comes down to Wisconsin against Iowa.
Probably.
It feels like Wisconsin versus Iowa, and Iowa's an interesting spot as well. Now, of course, we made a lot this preseason about the Brian Ferentz key performance indicators, i.e. got to have 25 points per game or he loses his job.
Yep.
That said, the AD, who I think brokered that little clause, is retiring.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows if that's something that they will actually uphold, but I think it's written into his contract, Dan. 25 to survive for Brian Ferentz. You can talk a little bit about whether or not you're feeling that 25 points per game now with Cade McNamara and presumably no real changes on the offensive side of the ball. The Iowa schedule is interesting in that there are only 4 true road games. They're at Iowa State, at Penn State, at Wisconsin, and at Nebraska. Obviously, those are not easy, but to be honest, those are the hardest games on the schedule. So as we said many moons ago, even though the schedule is definitely a talking point, it is very much like a post-schedule reality for Iowa at this point. They play defense. The defense smothers opposing offenses. It really is more a function of what kind of offense they themselves can generate that will determine their ultimate outcome this season, not so much who they're even playing, right? It's just they're kind of beyond that. What are you seeing on the Iowa side? Like, are you feeling over or under that 25 for Brian Ferentz? And what does this, I don't know, season look like to you?
So what I have written down here is the Ferentz tax. Because on its surface,
I got to ding that.
Ferentz tax. On the surface, what Iowa has returning, what Iowa has on both sides of the ball, what Iowa adds, I don't know, this is a question for another day, but you can do your best at answering it with no notice. Like, who's the most pretty good coach in college football? Like Sam Pittman? Like, what would Sam Pittman do with this exact roster, with the exact with Brian Ferentz calling the offense, with Phil Parker calling the defense in this exact roster, but you replace Kirk Ferentz, who's done obviously a really, really good job at Iowa, all things considered. But if you gave Sam Pittman this roster and Phil Parker, and it could change everything else. Like, you'd look at Iowa and be like, yeah, they're winning 9 games. They're absolutely winning 9 games and could certainly win the West once again and suffocate a number of teams on defense.
Dave Doran, I don't know.
Yeah, one of those coaches. And then you look at the Ferentz tax of the stubborn nature and the nepotism and not being able to attract and develop quarterbacks and to stick with something that's not working, to not be a destination for any sort of attractive skill player who's not a tight end. I don't know. You subtract points per game. You subtract points per drive. Here's the good news. If it truly was a quarterback issue last year, and this offensive staff and Kirk Ferentz learned from what plagued them, you've got an efficient quarterback in Cade McNamara. By the way, if we could just circle back, because you were using your KPIs, we can go corporate term here. If we could circle back here, is Cade McNamara the second best Big Ten quarterback in terms of, like, I mean, took a team to the playoffs?
That's sort of the point of the conference.
I mean, he's just,
it is not a great proven quarterback conference by any stretch.
I mean, he could just be Kelly Bryant, right? That he was right place, right time, efficient, didn't mess it up. I think he's a pretty good quarterback. I think he's pretty good. So he is throwing to what should be, again, good tight ends, including Eric All, who was hurt last year. But if you remember that Penn State game from a couple of years ago, it was a big-time tight end for Michigan a couple of years ago. They got a receiver from Ohio State. They should be decent at running back, but I think a lot of that is just going to depend on how predictable and creative the offense is in general. If it's creative and a little bit unpredictable, then Caleb Johnson should be pretty good. He was at times very good last year. The offensive line returns a ton. Is that a good thing? Who's to say? They weren't good last year. So, yes, there's experience there, Ty. But is that experience something you're actually looking for when talent also matters? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it was just, young guys thrown into it as you like, and now they feel more comfortable. They have their feet under them, whatever. Again, Ferentz tax. All those things, experienced offensive line, efficient quarterback, good tight ends, receivers, whatever. I just don't think we'll ever know if there's a good receiver at Iowa. But they have the advantage of the complement of the Iowa defense. Cooper DeJean, amazing, all Big Ten player. Like, they lose a bunch up front, they return a bunch up front. They should be fine at linebacker. We'll see on the defensive line. Riley Moss is gone, but I don't know. They just keep finding guys. They'll be fine in the secondary. No, they won't be fine. They'll be terrific in the secondary. But you can lose a game 13-10 just as easily as you can win. And so that's the issue. So the Ferentz tax to me is probably 4 or 5 points. I'm going to say they barely don't hit 25 a game for whatever that's worth.
Wow.
But
so does he get fired? Does he get fired
I think
if
it's
that
his
happens?
Last season. I think it's his last year. Either way, I think it's his last year.
They're
just not going to be so successful that, of course, you keep Brian Ferentz. What a turnaround story. They're not going to score 38 a game. So, I don't know. Why continue it?
It would be something if it's right around 25.
I think it's going to be 24-7.
24-7, or even like 25.1.
Yeah.
It just makes that discourse so freaking interesting. And bear in mind, there's also a change in leadership, as I said at the top here, going on at Iowa right now. Gary Barta stepping down and somebody new presumably stepping in who hasn't been there nearly as long as Gary Barta. Is there pressure to try and make any kind of change at Iowa?
Wow.
It's a hard thing to do given that Kirk Ferentz is royalty, but if faced with having to fire his son, what does that do? I don't know.
Well, it took the decision. They took the decision out of his hands, right?
Yeah, kind of. But it's just such an odd circumstance that we don't get these like WWE style career matches in college football all that often. And I'm just curious to see what happens. The over-under is 8.5, by the way, for the Iowa Hawkeyes this season. Right now, a lot of folks in on that over. I feel pretty good about the over. I think Iowa will be pretty good. I know we're going to make all of these wisecracks about the team and the circumstances and the Ferentzes, but they kind of do have it down pat at this point with being a pretty consistent team. It's just frustrating they're not getting to greater heights on that offensive side.
I wouldn't trust my wagering advice, but can I tell you something that is interesting to me?
Why not?
Okay. Iowa plays Utah State, Western Michigan, Rutgers, Northwestern. Okay? All teams that, if Iowa is firing on all cylinders, whatever that means to you, Ty, okay? They play those teams, which all could turn in a catastrophic performance against Iowa if Iowa is pretty good, decent, okay, competent, passable, whatever, on offense. The over in those games so that Brian Ferentz doesn't have to sweat, right?
Oh, you're thinking they lay it on.
So I'm thinking if they are laying it on Western Michigan, right? If it's clear at the half, if it's clear at the onset, I don't know if you're a live bet or whatever you are, but that they could score 65 points, that they're just going to keep starters in so that when you average it out, that they're going to have a couple of games fluffing up the average.
Wow.
So
the Ferentz fluff up.
A Ferentz fluff up against, I don't know. I mean, I think Rutgers had a pretty decent defense last year. We can get into that whenever.
Sure.
And Northwestern doesn't have a good defense. They don't have much of anything right now. But whether it's Utah State, whether it's Western Michigan, that to me, I don't know if it's an over thing. I don't know if you're just, giving the points. But I think there's going to be a Ferentz fluff up in one of those games. We're like, oh, wow, they beat Northwestern 80-10.
I jotted
and then they
down.
just score 17 a game the rest of the way, but the math works out. That's what I would do if I were a Ferentz.
Dan, I want to talk about Illinois next. You are in the great state of Illinois, are you not?
Is this just between us? Nobody can hear this? I am, and I am recording this. I am a resident of, and happy to be here, Ty. What do you want to know?
Do you have an Illinois driver's license now?
I haven't gotten that far yet. I still have my New York license. I need to get it. So, Illinois, arguably the story of the Big Ten last year. Yes, just with the degree to which their defense ascended and having Brett Bielema just back in our lives in a big way. Tommy DeVito.
Oh, yeah.
Now, a lot has changed. Maybe at the best corner in college football. He's gone, taken, 5th or 6th overall, Devin Witherspoon. But still a lot to like about Illinois. Now, the fascinating thing to me about Illinois is honestly how long they can be successful from the inside out. Because right now, offensive line is in a good place, defensive line is in a good place. They're rebuilding their secondary, but it's basically continuity of beef. The beef epoch. I don't know however you want to describe this.
Beef epoch.
But look, this is Brett Bielema. This is what he's always done and attempted to do. But Illinois just is not going to be always as advantaged as some of the bigger programs in the Big Ten. But yeah, I don't have any thoughts on Luke Altmaier. I think the offense will largely be okay. I think Josh McCray will be fine taking over for Chase Brown. But to me, it's still, do they have the beef to threaten to win the West once again?
Beef epoch gets a definite ding in the show. Are you kidding me?
By the way, when you go into your guttural, gets a definite, there is a little bit of the Raiders. There is a little bit of
the Raiders.
A little bit of Boomer to when you go to that register, which I always appreciate.
I'm not sure. I need to bring it up a register. I can't do
It's
it,
okay.
though. My voice is raspy from all these damn previews we've been doing.
Okay, so Isaiah Williams, not Juice Williams, but could be. Isaiah Williams back at receiver. He's sensational. They don't have the depth of receiver, but the line should be in good shape. If Luke Altmaier is decent, got beat out last year by Jackson Dart at Ole Miss, transferred. If he's decent, I mean, Tommy DeVito was accurate, but there wasn't a pop factor with Tommy DeVito all the time. This wasn't an offense built around stretching the field. But in some of those weird games that Illinois lost, if Luke Altmaier is if he's a little bit more dangerous, right, then Illinois becomes interesting because they're not going to have the pass defense. Obviously, Ryan Walters moves on. They hire internally at defensive coordinator. But there's still so much talent on that defense that I think they're just going to be, what did we call them last year? Our preview of Illinois last year was, I don't know how many games they win. I don't know who they beat, but they're just going to be such a pain in the ass. Which was true. We nailed that. Happy about that. I think I was the one who previewed Illinois last year as well. So I see a lot of the same, but it's another year of experience, and I wouldn't want to play Illinois. They're the root canal of the conference. Right?
They're a pain in the ass.
So
being a pain in the ass in this sense is not a bad thing at all.
No, and they have a team built around defense. They're playing a Kansas team early on in Lawrence, a team built around offense, and they have Penn State the very next week, which is quite the 1-2. They've got a stretch of at Purdue, so seeing Ryan Walters once again, Nebraska at Maryland, Wisconsin, all in a row, finish at Iowa, and then play Northwestern in Champaign. So all in all, this should be a bowl team to me. The drive for 6 is very real in Champaign, and I see them going bowling.
Well, Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph up front should help along the defensive line. I mean, I called it out earlier, but they've got a pretty good defensive line, and the beef epic.
Epoch.
Like
yeah.
Epoch.
The Raiders.
Love it. The Raiders.
Okay, where are we going next?
You tell me. Where do you want to go?
Let's talk Penn State. Let's talk Penn State football.
Oh, man. You want me to go to that register
Did you see
again?
Pat Narduzzi called them like a baby offense? Did you see that
Baby
today?
offense.
Yeah, when he was talking about
it's a one-word offense.
one word.
Now,
Christian Veo finally gets to play in a big boy offense. Yeah,
in a big boy offense. Then he came out after the fact and clarified that he didn't intend it as any kind of. I love Pat Narduzzi giving 0 Fs.
He's great.
It's the best story in college football.
I know, he's good.
He just doesn't care. I love it.
He's gonna bring his transition lenses to game day one day, and it's gonna be great.
So Penn State, man, look, I can't even hide my optimism for Penn State this year. 11-2 last year. Their only losses were against Ohio State and Michigan. The Michigan game was never close. The Ohio State game wasn't really either, but it was not quite as lopsided, let's say, as the Michigan game. The most fascinating thing about Penn State in 2023 is that this is the best team James Franklin has ever had. In his time at Penn State, this is going to be his 10th year. This is the best team he's ever freaking had.
It's the best preseason team.
Best preseason team, thank you.
Okay.
Important point of
because they won
clarification.
the Big Ten. They've won the Big Ten,
Best preseason team he's ever had. If Drew Allarm lives up to the hype, who knows, man? Who knows?
Okay.
Who knows what the heights are of this team? My optimism stems from the fact that this team has a really good offensive line coming into the season, which is not something I can ever remember saying in my time on this podcast, which I started with you way back when in 2008. Yep. I've never once said the offensive line is something I'm excited about this year. Never.
That's fair.
So I am pumped because there are 4 starters back. Olu Fashanu is the big name up front. He would have been a first-round draft pick. He got some first-round steam, but he decided to come back and get his degree and help build this team forward. The line stats that I looked at, the ones that you have access to, they all project forward a line that's got a lot of experience, but has some work to do in terms of run blocking, right? They could do a lot better in terms of run blocking, but still, if you look at what they did last season, this was the 11th most explosive rushing team.
Wow.
Which tells me that the running backs, two true freshmen, Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, are really freaking good. Yeah.
Agree.
Really freaking good. So if the line gets a little bit better, if the running backs are still as dynamic as they were last season, we have no reason to think otherwise. This is going to be a really good offense that is built around the run. And then if you layer in Drew Allarm, my guy, Drew Allarm, suddenly we're talking about an offense that's got some serious pop. Now, I wanted Aller to play last year.
Yes, you did.
Knowing even knowing what I know now, I still would have played him last year because I thought there was a definite ceiling on Sean Clifford. And by the way, that's an 11-win team from last year that won the Rose Bowl over Utah. Okay?
Correct.
So they're pretty good in their own right, and Sean Clifford broke like every passing record. But Drew Aller just gives him something more, man. He gives him more of a downfield threat. Sean Clifford, if you look at his air yard stats, 7.7 air yards per throw. On the whole, that was like outside the top 100 for this passing offense last season. Drew Aller can be the X factor. He's bigger. He's got the stronger arm. He can move. I am enamored with what he brings to this offense. Even if they find themselves in the unlikely circumstance that something could harm this 6'5" mountain of a man, they've got Bo Prabula behind him, who the coaching staff was playing footsies with all offseason long, trying to prevent him, I think, from transferring. I don't know. But this is all very, very, very long way of saying that I'm super excited about Penn State this season. I'm not sure what the rapport looks like with the receiving core because, they've got some turnover there. Keandre Lambert-Smith, it is Smith, not Brown. Excuse my prior misspeaking. Mm-hmm. He is, I think, going to be the number one, but I'm very excited about what Dante Cephas brings via the transfer portal. I think there is a lot to be excited about with this Penn State offense, especially since it is built from the line out. Defensively, they should still be pretty solid. Defensively, this is maybe a nose better than Ohio State.
Could be.
In terms of
At
defense.
Its best. Yeah, there's a lot of star power.
The star power that I want everyone on this show to know about. You and everybody listening.
You have my attention.
Danny Dennis Sutton, DDS.
Okay.
Get yourselves used to DDS because he's going to be a star this season along the defensive line. Adisa Isaac, Chop Robinson also back along the line. Ferocious pass rush incoming for the Penn State Nittany Lions. I love Abdul Carter at linebacker. Joey Porter is gone, but Kalen King is still there, one of the three best corners, defensive backs in the league. The question really boils down to this, and I probably could have saved y'all a bunch of time just by starting here. Can they beat Ohio State? Can they beat Michigan?
Yep.
That's it.
They look like they were good enough.
That's the question.
Look, they look like they were good enough to beat Ohio State last year. They absolutely look like they were a good enough team. Sean Clifford made 2.5 to 4.5 throws or something where you're just like, those are throws that a quarterback would throw if he was determined to lose a game.
Exactly right.
And so
you couldn't be more right.
And so other than outside of his specific decisions in those specific moments in the first quarter and a half, Penn State did plenty to win that game. Unfortunately, again, every play matters. And so you cannot say that about Michigan, though. They did not look like they belonged on the same field as Michigan last year.
No, that game was never close. Yep. I mean, it was close, I think, at halftime, but even that was kind of a mirage. Right. The question of whether or not this Penn State team can beat Ohio State or Michigan is going to be with them all season long until they play one or two of those teams. Mm-hmm. If they emerge from the 2023 campaign with fewer than 10 wins and or a loss to both of Ohio State and Michigan, I think this will be a disappointing season. I really think expectations are on that level, and I don't think we're wrong to put them there. They got to beat one of those two teams. Yeah. They just got to. If they don't, then there's going to be a lot of disappointed fans out there. And I don't think that's overselling it because the schedule's really not that bad, Dan. They're going to manhandle West Virginia in week 1. There's no crazy run of games and back-to-back road spots. No murderer's rows, no wounders rows, as we would say. There's a stretch early of Illinois and Iowa, which is extremely Penn State. And one of those two games, it's inevitable it's going to be closer than it should be. But anything less than 10-2, anything less than beating, Ohio State or Michigan, I think is a big-time disappointment with all the talent they've got back.
Is there a little bit of Center County Clemson to Penn State? I had to look up which county State College was in for that mediocre
Center,
goof.
C-E-N-T-R-E.
Yeah, Center County.
Spelled like the
Centre.
The English way.
Yes, quite please, Central Court.
What do you mean by that?
Pop on offense. I don't think they have Will Shipley. I think they've got good running backs in Allen and Singleton. And they have good running backs, maybe with the ceiling of great. We'll see. Singleton was, I think, the number 1 overall running back coming out of high school.
He was.
Obviously there's some sort of crazy talent ceiling, likely, and he pops some big plays. So there is pop with him at his best. Receivers my question for Penn State, because year over year, they are one of the very few teams in college football that has had a clear ace, a clear stud. KJ Hamler, Jahan Dotson. You go back to the Joe Moorhead years in, Chris Godwin, all these different guys. You go back even further than that, and Allen Robinson. Like, they've had this very quiet string of excellent top line Big Ten receiver play. And when I look at the roster, and maybe it's Cephas, he's a smaller guy though, not that Penn State hasn't succeeded with those guys. I wonder if there is that guy, and maybe to last year it was Parker Washington at his best.
Yeah, it was.
My question is there somebody obvious? Because Dante Cephas hasn't done it on this level. Tinsley was very good last year.
Dante Cephas hasn't done it on this level. I mean,
so that's what I wonder right
Lambert
now.
Smith is kind of the presumed number 1.
Is there a younger player? Is there an unexpected name that you secretly love? Like, that to me is it's not a concern. I'm not actually worried about Penn State, but that's my curiosity about where Penn State is. Like, do they have that gravitational dude in the way that Ohio State does? I think Michigan will end up having. Does Penn State?
Yeah, I mean, and that is kind of the question, right? If we're talking about this hotshot quarterback stepping in, who are going to be the weapons out wide that we see emerge? I don't know. And right now, I think we have a few names to go on, but unless we're talking about guys like Omari Evans or Harrison Wallace,
right? You're going with the register again, Ty.
I'm not trying to. I can't help it.
No, that's good.
I'm very raspy after all these previews.
Good. No, keep going.
I'm very excited about Penn State.
Okay.
I'm very excited.
The defense should be great.
I think defense will be great. The pass rush will be really, really solid. They got to replace something in the secondary, but don't we all?
I guess, yeah.
I think Penn State's going to be really, really good. And if there is a circumstance in which every one of Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State are like 1-1 against each other, seems entirely plausible to me.
So of the 6 units of what we perceive to be the Big Ten powers, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State right now, of their 6 main units, so excluding special teams, all due respect to special teams, where does Penn State's defense rank among those 6?
I think Penn State's got the second best defense.
Oh, I'm saying defense or offense, just in terms of unit rankings. So 1 through 6, you think Penn State has the second best unit of these 6?
Yeah, I mean, if we're ranking it
behind Michigan's defense,
I put Michigan's defense ahead of Penn State's and ahead of Ohio State's by a nose. I would also put Michigan's offense ahead of Ohio State's offense, and then put Penn State third, just because there's a lot of unknown there still with Drew Allarm. Right? I like them. I think they'll be very good, but there are more unknowns on the Penn State side. Honestly, in terms of if I'm ranking
overall units, would you have Penn State's
all 6 of those?
Penn State's defense ahead of Ohio State's offense?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so third overall?
I think the best of all of those worlds would be Michigan's offense right now.
Michigan's defense.
How they're ramped up. Michigan's offense. I put 1.
So Michigan's offense, Ohio State's offense, and then Penn State's defense?
Probably in that order,
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, Michigan's defense.
Maybe Michigan's defense ahead of Penn State's defense.
Okay, so 4 now.
4.
Okay.
We'll put them at 4.
I think they're right there. I think, look, at their best, and I'm not familiar with the 2 deep like you are, Penn State's defense might be number 1.
Mm-hmm. It's possible. It's
with
very
what
possible.
They return.
And there's a clear gap between Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State.
Okay.
And Penn State, I think, has enough weaponry this year where they can start challenging that top tier.
Yeah. This is the year. We talked about it with Michigan. Are we pointing to this year or next year? It's probably next year, all things considered, with Penn State, to give
it's probably next year.
Yeah.
It's probably next year because of Aller. But this type of line, returning production along the line for Penn State, is just so rare.
Yeah.
For the last 15 years, honestly. It never happens like this. So in that sense, it'll be.
So is the offensive line the thing? Is that
rebuild.
the fascinating item?
That's the thing.
Okay.
That's the thing. I mean, the thing is that this is the best team Franklin's ever had, but the sub thing is definitely the offensive line.
Love it. Okay. Fair enough. Where do you want to go next in the West?
I want to talk about Maryland quickly.
I
want to talk Maryland quickly here, because Maryland is the conversation we had with Jeff Erman when we brought him on the program to talk about Maryland football was really like, what are they missing? What are they missing? Maryland wants to get to that next rung, which is beating one of those top three.
Mm-hmm.
And they were 8-5 last season. They're over under 7 this year. Most fascinating thing for Maryland, both the offensive and defensive lines are a near complete rebuild. And that is a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tainted beef.
Both are very green and thin, which is not a great combination, especially when you're talking about teams like Michigan, when you're talking about teams like Penn State, even when you're talking like teams like Rutgers that are going to run the ever-loving crap out of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
That is a problem because their top 5 defensive linemen are gone. The line, I think, for Maryland is a big-time limiting factor, which frankly is a bummer because the rest of the team is actually pretty good. And the schedule is extremely gumpy.
Explain
it
what
sets
that
up
means.
well for them.
Explain what that means in case you haven't been following along with our nonsense.
Yeah, I can link up the schedule preview, but gumpy means they catch teams in weird spots. They always find themselves in weird scheduling circumstances.
Yes.
And that makes them an attractive pick. I think it will against the spread. But it's just a line thing for me, man. I have a hard time with this line, but not with this team. I think that Mike Loxley's actually done a pretty good job. Did you know that Maryland was 33rd overall in defense last season?
I probably knew before the interview we did with Jeff Erman, but not off the top of my head, no.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good, right? For Maryland, with where they've been, to be the 33rd best defense, that's the best that they've been since the Randy Edsall days. So all due credit to Brian Williams, their defensive coordinator, did a good job. The defense isn't going to bottom out this year. Most of the back 7 is back, but it's hard to look at a matchup against some of those teams that we know are going to run and think, okay, there's a pathway to victory here, barring any kind of turnover fest or something like that. The other fascinating thing about Maryland is that they've got both Josh Gaddis and Kevin Sumlin running the offense this year.
Sure.
Which is new and different and, 2 recycles, I guess, in a sense. I have absolutely no idea what that looks
Everything 2011 Ty would have been crazy impressed by. Yeah.
I would have been nuts about this. Are you kidding me? Incredible. What does this look like? I have no idea. No idea what to expect. I love Talia. I love Rovan Hemby.
Yeah, I remember
But
this.
again, this is not a bottoming out situation, I don't think. It just feels very uncertain across the board because of the line. I don't know what I think about their receiving core, but I think Talia is good enough to at least stabilize that side of things. It's just more uncertainty in offense than defense. The schedule's gumpy. The Michigan game is at home a week after Michigan goes to Penn State.
No, I think Nebraska's between. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Continue. I'm reading this wrong.
Yeah, the game against Michigan State is embedded in a stretch where Sparty plays Washington and Iowa before and after. The Penn State games a week before Penn State hosts Michigan. The games against Illinois and Nebraska are just sort of wedged in as well. So the way it stands for Maryland, the over-under 7, 5 easy wins on the schedule. The question is, in order to hit that 8, can they win 3 of Michigan State, Indiana, Ohio State, Illinois, Penn State, Nebraska, and Michigan?
Yep.
I say no. I think it's a push. I wouldn't bet anything.
Okay.
But that's just me.
So the upside is that the lines come together. Talia stays healthy, which has not always been a reality. Defense gets some takeaways, catches teams at the right spot. Maybe it's a beat up Michigan or beat up Penn State because they play them both near the end of the year, correct?
Yep,
so that they get a couple situational advantages, break through against one of those teams. I mean, they were right there with both Ohio State and Michigan last year. I think it was 30-0 was the Penn State game last year.
Yeah.
So that was tough.
Yeah.
But
that was not a good game.
Right. So that they're getting up for these big games. They have to finish games, which they weren't always doing last year. They have to stay healthy. There's a lot of have-tos here. But if they're going to get to that 8-win plateau that we talked about, then it has to be.
It's a line thing
Getting
this year.
kind of lucky that it all works out on both sides of the line of scrimmage.
It's a line thing this year, and if they catch teams, then obviously there's Maryland plays hard. I would not want to play Maryland. Maryland has, I think, shown a lot of fight, and it obviously is that next stage for them to try and beat one of those top 3. I don't know if it's happening this year with the way that this roster is built out, but in general, I like the team. It's just kind of circumstantially weird.
Okay, and do they still have a clear? Rakeem Jarrett is gone.
Rakeem Jarrett's gone. Yeah. I mean, it's just Sean Jones, who they had to talk back for a 6th year,
right? Okay,
as their primary target out wide. So it's like I said, it's a little bit dicey out wide.
Okay, fair enough.
Dan, I want to talk about Nebraska now.
Sure.
New coach, Matt Rule. We can ding this thing 1,000 times over if we want. I won't, I promise.
Mm-hmm.
We're up to 20 now. Yeah, talk me through Nebraska. What is your thinking on the Huskers?
So offensive line, thin defensive line. We can just, it's a continuity thing with the Maryland preview, a continuation. No, look, Nebraska, the fascinating thing with Nebraska is you just want to see the bones. You just want to see the skeleton. You just want to see the foundation, right? That you just want to see what Nebraska could look like at times with the right guys. And I think they're recruiting on a pretty high level right now. I think they have a top 20 class in 2024. And if you look at like the states they're recruiting from, it's like Texas, Florida, Hawaii, California, Florida. Like they're all over the place. They're selling, Matt Rule is selling that Nebraska brand. But we're also talking about a team that is going to start a up and down Georgia Tech transfer at quarterback and Jeff Sims. Casey Thompson transfers to Florida Atlantic. Anthony Grant promising at running back. I don't think they've got a ton of talent at receiver. You know, Eric Gilbert comes over. Tight end is in a pretty good spot. The defense, I mean, it's an experienced secondary, but there's not much up front. Now, it's a Matt Rule team, so I think they're going to overperform, at least my evaluation, my silly evaluation. I still think it's a talent deficiency up front. It's going to take a minute. And so can a healthy Jeff Sims, who is a good version of himself and limiting interceptions, if he stays healthy all year and spreads the ball around well, I don't know. The Marcus Satterfield hire is fine. There was a lot of like old school talk I saw. Bill Connolly was writing about this where it's just like, we're going to huddle. We're going to run this. And I was like, okay. Yeah.
A lot of football guy talk.
If you do it right, great. But that was a little bit alarming to me. I think look, it's year 2, year 3 for Matt Rule. That's all that kind of matters at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we know this about him, right? I mean, he's very good at building programs, and it isn't until year 3 that you see that lift in most cases.
Right.
Do you believe that version of Jeff Sims exists, by the way? The good version of Jeff Sims?
I've seen good Jeff Sims. Yeah. I think it exists, but behind this offensive line, throwing to these receivers,
the good version of Jeff Sims is a lot like UFOs.
Okay.
In that there's no real good picture of them that the public has seen. Right. They're always very fuzzy and circumstantial and theoretical, and you have varying eyewitness accounts.
You know what I think? I think Jeff Sims would be a really good candidate to say, who's this year's Max Duggan? Not because I believe it, but just because I think everybody believes in the better version of himself and the upside there, and that maybe it's a situation, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a place, whatever. Obviously, Max Duggan stays in Fort Worth during the duration of his college career. But I think Jeff Sims would be a good value if you were to wager on whose name would be dropped in that conversation. Obviously, its situation's completely different. Yeah, Nebraska, it's just bones. That's the fascinating thing to me.
So you are quoting the wise prophet Maren Morris and saying, the house don't fall if the bones are good, yes?
I'll take your word for it. I don't celebrate her catalog in the way that you do, obviously. I know she sang the middle, right?
Nobody's perfect. It's fine.
So, yeah, that's my Nebraska fascination, is just seeing the magnitude of, or not magnitude really, but like the degree to which they play hard. And well, they're on the road at Minnesota and Colorado, I believe, to begin. Michigan and Illinois back to back. That's a tough 1-2 defense. Illinois and Champaign. They finish at Camp Randall in Madison, and then the Heroes game is in Lincoln. So it's a rocky road, but curious to see who the emerging dudes are. There's a lot of Georgia. There's a lot of Florida. Utah, Baylor. There's transfers in from major programs to fill out this roster. But I think it's going to take a few games.
Do you follow Matt Rule on social media?
More active than I would have. Very emoji forward, right?
Yeah. What's with that? That was going to be my question. really into the Emojipedia stuff.
Whatever he wants, man. Whatever he wants.
Just biding his time until that Penn State job opens. Telling you.
You're still on that train.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, 100%.
All right.
100%. Going to happen.
Okay. Next team.
I do want to talk about Minnesota. You mentioned Minnesota.
Yeah. Elite, if you were to believe front office. Elite. How are you today? I'm elite.
Yeah, there was a nice piece that came out.
You're good.
On
Are you elite?
PJ Fleck.
God.
Do you like PJ Fleck as a coach?
I guess. I mean,
there's a little bit of snake oil there.
Well, there's snake oil with everybody, every head coach.
Sure.
He has done a number of things. They've been at their best. So now you're going back 3 years, 2019 season. At their best, they were one of the very best teams in terms of entertainment factor on offense. The hire of Joe Rossi, I think, was sensational. He has done wonders with their defense without high-end talent. But the past couple years, entertainment factor has not been there at all. So he wins games. He goes to bowl games.
Slow and monotonous and just, not great television.
I kind of feel, and look, Tanner Morgan was there forever. He got hurt last year again. They always seem to look better than what their final record would suggest how the season went, if that makes any sense. Like, they should have appeared in more Big Ten championship games when the offense was rolling, when the defense was incredible. The defense was great last year. It was really, really good. But they don't turn it into actual postseason appearances and results in the way that you would think. So I don't know. I think they're sort of a B+ program, and they're sort of in that.
I mean, we talked about the schedule when we did the schedule preview, which again, I promise I'll link up here just so people want to go back and listen to that. They've got 4 of the toughest Big Ten teams on the schedule. Yeah. They've got Michigan, they're at Iowa, they're at Ohio State. They also have Wisconsin. Obviously, they're in the West. They also go to North Carolina in week 3.
Correct.
So those are 5 tough games right there on top of what you might get playing against Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Right? On top of what you might get opening week against Nebraska. Who knows what this version of Nebraska looks like. Maybe the Bones will be good. I don't know. So there's just a lot here with Minnesota. And I know the corner we painted ourselves into when we talked about them previously was the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, they're the beneficiaries of a really advantageous schedule. You may or may not believe that if you're listening at home. I'm not going to tell you what to believe.
Right.
But
if you were going
that will not be the case this year.
No,
that will not be the case
brutal.
this year. Because this is a tough slate. This is a really tough slate. And if he can't get everything aligned, maybe Athan Kaliakmanis is the answer. The Greek freak.
Could be.
I don't know.
So
but this is a tough slate.
Yeah, he showed definite promise last year in relief most of the time, not all of the time. They have an interesting combination of returning and transfer wide receivers and running backs. Here's what I wrote down: Western Minnesota, because their newly promoted offensive coordinator, Greg Harbaugh, was at Western Michigan a couple of years ago. They bring in Western Michigan's really good running back. They bring in their best receiver. They bring in a promising linebacker, all from Western Michigan. So Western Minnesota. So that's good, I think, to fortify things. Yeah. Hopefully get some more consistency. Hopefully get some more pop. Chris Ottman-Bell's back for a 7th year.
Unbelievable.
Chris Ottman-Bell.
Unbelievable.
We had a Chris Ottman-Bell sound. I think it was like the Taco Bell like 4 years ago. We downloaded that and put that on the sound.
You were still in your 30s.
I was in my 30s, Ty. That's very true. The offensive line should be pretty good. The defensive line is in good shape. It's basically a rebuilt secondary. Linebackers are pretty new. And as you mentioned, the schedule's pretty brutal. I think they'll go to a bowl game. They have the field. They have like a 7-5 feel to me.
I need to ding Chris Ottman-Bell. I don't have the bell sound. I have to find it.
It was
a
again. Bong. It was that kind of lower register of a Taco Bell register. So Western Minnesota. I don't know who that's insulting to. But next, where are we going? Indiana? We going Rutgers? Michigan State?
No, we're going Michigan State.
All right, let's talk Spartans.
Yeah. Where do I start with last year?
Start with like the end. That seemed to be a little bit more promising.
Well, yeah, it was. I mean, So look, the defense was bad. If you listen to this show, you know the defense was bad. Mm-hmm. You know where Michigan State's been. The defense was really bad last season. The best wins were over Illinois and Wisconsin. They were not great at throwing the ball. They were much worse at running it. Alas, you go 5-7. That's how you miss a bowl game. That's just the rub here. The most fascinating thing now, I think, going into the season is the fact that they had 2 late transfers, really late transfers in the cycle, in Peyton Thorne and Keon Coleman. Peyton Thorne goes to Auburn. I think he might be the starter at Auburn.
I still think I saw that Robbie Ashburn? Am I Ashland?
Ashford, yeah.
What is it? Robbie
Ashford.
Yes, the Oregon transfer. I should remember that.
You're thinking of Richie Ashburn, former Philadelphia
exactly
Philly.
What I'm thinking of. I'm always thinking of I'm either thinking of him or Richie Sexton, Ty. You know how my brain works.
Of course.
Yeah, it does not super confident in, or it's not super promising to look at the best receiver and the best quarterback as transferring out late in the process.
No. Well, so here's the thing. Peyton Thorne, you could have made a case that Peyton Thorne shouldn't have played last year. That should have been Noah Kim instead. But Keon Coleman, I think, is really the one that's more problematic because he kind of penciled in as the new number 1 receiver after, they had Jaden Reed go to the pros. Mm-hmm. So that one hurts a lot out wide. And as we look forward now with this offense, it's probably Noah Kim or Kattenhauser at quarterback, kind of waiting to see who develops out wide. The offensive line will be a bit better, so maybe that means a better running game this year with Jalen Berger, but they're really thin at running back. Mel Tucker would have you believe that this was his best transfer class ever. I don't buy that for a second. They tried to go out and do the thing with the transfer portal again that they had a lot of success with in year 1 with Kenneth Walker, right? But we have not yet seen similar returns as to what we saw for Mel Tucker in that season. So I'm really mixed on the offense. I don't have a whole lot of reason to feel overly confident. In general, I would say on the defensive side, and by no means do I mean that this is the case everywhere, but in general, when we talk about bad defense, we're also starting with talking about bad lines. Mm-hmm. And Michigan State was super beat up last year along the line. So what ends up happening is you're beat up, you end up giving new guys a chance to get in there and get reps. They should have a fair amount of experience come back this season up front. The front 7 as a whole, I think looks okay, but the secondary just has new faces. Michigan State only had 2 interceptions last season, if I count it correctly, 2, which is not good. I think the secondary will be a problem, could be a problem this season for Sparty. So I would say big time question mark on the offensive side of the ball, especially given the fact that we had transfers from those 2 key contributors or projected key contributors. And on defense, I think maybe a step forward along the front 7. However, the secondary remains an issue, and that's not great because the secondary was an issue last season.
And I like their coordinator. I like Scotty Hazelton on defense.
I do.
I was a bit surprised to see Jay Johnson back on offense, but I don't know. It just seems like it's another year of like, check out all these transfers.
I know.
And you're like,
I know.
At a certain point, that's bad that you're this active in the portal and this many years.
Exactly.
Now, how many? We're 3 years in to Mel Tucker. I'm okay with a portal, filling out the roster with your guys year 1, year 2, or, maybe more year 1 after your first season, seeing what you have. But now this far in, I don't know.
I think what we're finding out about the transfer portal
around Michigan State.
Yeah, what we're finding out about the transfer portal is that you could use it, and to some extent you can even abuse it. You can bring a ton of guys in, but you need to have something of a foundation first. Yep. If you're using the portal solely to try and win games and solely to build a roster year to year to year to year, that is not sustainable.
Yeah.
And Michigan State, unfortunately, I think is kind of an example of that. So, I don't know. Given where I think Michigan State is at right now, I think the schedule is pretty tough. They're at Iowa, at Ohio State, home against Washington in week 3, which is not great. Mm-hmm. Home against Michigan, home against Penn State. Who knows what November Nebraska looks like in week 10? I could see them being plucky, but again, there's a Jeff Sims question that we addressed before. I don't feel good about Michigan State this season. I'm sort of out.
What's going to happen if they need to buy out Mel Tucker? Is Matt Ishbia going to have to trade Kevin Durant to afford It's all connected, Ty. I don't know how sports business works.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wild.
But I do know that I am fascinated with the Indiana Hoosiers this year, Dan.
You're going down a road, Ty. Okay. Why are you
I am
fascinated
not
with
going
Indiana?
down the road you think I'm going down.
Okay.
I'm not saying 9 Windiana.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying 8 or 7 or even 6 Windiana.
Okay.
I'm not doing that. I promise you. But I feel better about Indiana than I expected.
Okay.
I really do. I like their quarterback. I like Dexter Williams.
Everywhere I look in this sport, somebody has an Indiana transfer. Well, they've got this promising Indiana linebacker trend. They've got this promising defensive
Dexter
lineman
Williams.
from Indiana.
I like Josh Henderson at running back.
Okay.
I don't hate their offensive line, which is the nicest thing I can say about it.
Yeah.
I don't hate their D line, which is definitely a different thing for me to say. I think Indiana will be better than last year, even if they don't win more games. They were 4-8 a
Okay.
year ago. That's all I'm saying. Their over-under is 3.5. And I said in our schedule preview that I could see a path to 3, which you laughed at.
Who's starting at quarterback? Yeah.
I think it's Dexter Williams.
Okay.
Because he gave them some pop last year. I think it's him.
Okay.
I think he's a guy. This team's it's a little bit of a gump factor here with the schedule, but it's not easy. Look, they're Indiana, and they can beat Indiana State, they can beat Akron, they can beat Rutgers.
Hold on. We need to email home field and tell them to print shirts that say, "Look, they're Indiana."
They got to steal another one away to
Okay.
get that over. And that's where it gets weird because they got a neutral siter against Louisville. They're at Maryland. They're at Michigan. They're at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
They're home against Wisconsin. They're at Illinois. Home against Michigan State. Maybe Michigan State will be the one.
Okay.
Maybe Michigan State will be the game that they steal.
Did they play? Was that the weirdest game of the Big Ten season last year? Indiana, Michigan State?
Oh, yeah.
I'm almost
it was
positive that's
up
what I'm
there.
thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, it was up there. So I don't know. I'm more bullish on Indiana than I expected, but even in a good circumstance, it's like 5 wins.
Okay. Can you count them off for me? Look at the schedule and find me the 5?
I just did.
Oh,
I just
sorry.
did.
I thought you were just running through their schedule. Okay.
No. I mean, it's Indiana State, Akron, and Rutgers are the wins. And then they got to steal one of those other teams that I
So
listed.
give me the 2.
I mean, it could be,
Give me the most likely.
it could be Michigan State. I think it's Michigan State to hit the over.
Where is that game?
Game's at home.
Okay. And who else?
I'll get back to you. Maybe Purdue, maybe Illinois.
I think Purdue's on the table. Illinois. Yeah, we'll see. Okay. 5-win ceiling.
That's where I'm at with Indiana.
All right. So I guess
I'm gonna ding my Windiana because I'm really proud of that.
Okay. Okay. 4 or 5 games for Northwestern is a miracle. It's Ben Bryant. Ben Bryant plus a promising back half of their defense, even though I don't trust the line, don't trust the coordinator, who is now the head coach. The North Dakota State defensive coordinator is now the head coach of the Big Ten team. David Braun. David Braun, that's his name? Yes?
David Braun, yeah.
This is all very new. The offensive line is considerably worse because they might have had the best offensive lineman in football last year, and Peter Skoronski at left tackle. Evan Hull is gone. There is little to no pop or even like diet pop at receiver. And it's just, I feel for players that were hopefully not around any of the allegations. You go to Northwestern, you believe that, you're going to a great academic place that has great, upside for football. The best of Northwestern is very competitive. And now you are just on an island. And right. I don't like, how do you summon the motivation at this point if you're Northwestern when you have the ability to leave, and you have the ability to leave sooner rather than later because a different head coach recruited you. You don't know who the new head coach is going to be. And it's just now a situation of get through the season and see what's what. And so, yeah, you look at their schedule, and I have it in front of me, but like Minnesota and Penn State back to back. The back half is at Nebraska, Maryland, Iowa, at Wrigley Field, by the way. So this interim Northwestern situation at Wrigley Field, at Wisconsin, Purdue, at Illinois. Yeah, 4 or 5 is a miracle for Northwestern, unfortunately.
They've got Duke on there.
Yep.
Which is another
They
tough
lost
game.
last second last year. Yeah, obviously they didn't win a single game on American soil last year.
Okay.
Who are their other non-conference if you have the schedule in front of you?
They've got UTEP.
Yeah.
They've got Howard.
Yeah, 4 or 5 is a miracle. If they can beat UTEP and Howard, and UTEP is feisty, was a bowl team a couple years ago. It has the feel of like 2-10.
It would be really interesting if, and I know they don't.
Or
have the
1-11, or 0-12.
It's entirely possible. What I was going to say, it'd be really interesting if David Braun goes out there and turns in like 5 or 6 wins.
Sure.
I don't think that's likely, but they could beat Rutgers.
Well, look,
beat UTEP. They beat Howard.
Ben Bryant is more of a quarterback, arguably like Peyton Ramsey was something. I know he went to your beloved Indiana, but he was something. They mounted like the 80th best offense or 78th best offense, something like that with him. But Ben Bryant is something. He is a piece. I think it's Cam Porter in the backfield, I believe. There's just the path to Northwestern, flirting with a bowl is
very narrow.
Non-existent.
Very narrow.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's
I
very
hope
narrow.
for Northwestern's sake that, the athletic department and everything that hung around forever and ever, that diseased things allegedly, is cleared out and there's a fresh start. But that is probably the worst place for there to be a fresh start at, just because of how much it takes at Northwestern in the portal era, in the NIL era.
Let's close things out with the Rutgers, Dan.
Yeah.
The most fascinating thing is we get this sound again.
Kirk Shiraka.
He's back, baby.
Bouncing all over. Yep.
$1.4 million. He's back. Look, they're going to try to run the crap out of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're going to do. The line is mostly back. The running back room is pretty deep. Their passing game was an absolute unmitigated mess last season.
Yeah, it was bad.
It was really bad. But presumably Gavin Wimsatt's going to be your starting quarterback. Just named the starting quarterback this week, by the way, by Greg Schiano at Media Day. 4-star in the class of 2021, so maybe he'll show out. I don't know. Nassim Brantley's their big target they got from Western Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
The transfer in, but relatively thin out wide. It does seem like the defense is improving, but the offense remains a problem. Yeah, the defense is okay, and that shouldn't surprise anybody. Greg Schiano's a defensive mind, but the offense they've struggled to kind of find their way on offense, right? Sean Gleason didn't work out. Now it's Kirk Shiraka. They're bringing him back in. I think we've seen Kirk Shiraka around the Big Ten enough to know what we are going to get here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be slower, more efficient football. They're going to try to run it. That's probably the right approach, to be honest, at Rutgers, given where they're at right now. The schedule's brutal for Rutgers, though. It is absolutely
as it always
brutal.
seems to be. Yeah.
It always seems to be. This just feels worse to me. Now, maybe not as bad as I thought, because they open with Northwestern. They can beat Northwestern. Given where Northwestern's at, Northwestern's in a state of disarray given circumstances. Mm-hmm. Northwestern, Temple, Virginia Tech, their first 3 games.
3-0.
After that, Michigan, Wagner, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Indiana, Ohio State, Iowa, Penn State, Maryland. Gets tough.
Mm-hmm.
Gets tough outside the first 3 weeks of the season. So what's a realistic expectation for Rutgers? 2-3 wins here. I think is plausible. If they can get the ground game going, if Gavin Wimsatt is going to live up to his 4-star potential when he came in,
right?
Then maybe something a little bit better than that. But I'm not overly bullish. I think it's going to be very, very slow progress, if anything, for Rutgers.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if they had a quarterback with a higher ceiling, what I think is a higher ceiling. Paired with that defense, I think they become interesting. Maybe not in the Big Ten East, of course. It's a tricky schedule.
It's tough.
But
it's really tough.
Look, they should have beaten Nebraska, was who they lost to tight last year. So they probably should have beaten Nebraska, and they also beat Indiana, I believe, last year. So I think progress is winning 3 Big Ten games, whoever those are. I mean, that's up to you. But they're the team that, I don't know if they should be a transfer quarterback destination, but I'd be curious to see what they look like. Like if Phil Jurkovec played for Rutgers, what does that do for them, right? If they just have like a serviceable Power 5 guy that has like clear potential. But they just haven't had that. It's Noah Vedral. It's, it's cast-offs that can't do much within the confines of not great offenses.
I was convinced that King Arthur Sikowski was going to be the dude. Yeah, I was convinced he was going to be the guy, and that just didn't.
He was Illinois' backup last year, I believe.
Yeah. King Arthur. Yep.
Oh, well.
Yep. That brings us to the end of the show, Dan.
Yes.
I don't believe we missed any teams. Let's talk about conference championship.
Okay.
So the obvious answer is Michigan, Ohio State. Are you veering from Michigan,
You
Ohio
mean in
State
the
at all?
East?
Overall, who are the two best teams in the conference, if not those two? Let's start with that. I know they still have the divisions.
Right.
We have to talk through who we think they're going to face off against.
Yeah.
But if we're talking through predictions, just in the Big Ten East, since it seems like that side of the conference is going to rule the roost, are we going Michigan, Ohio State 1-2 on that side, or are we going to think maybe Penn State sneaks in there?
I have Michigan winning the Big Ten yet again. They're more complete.
Who do they beat in the conference championship then?
Iowa. Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm taking Iowa over Wisconsin because Iowa's defense is the best thing in that those four main units. Michigan, Iowa. Yeah. So it's a repeat of the 2021 Big Ten championship game, which Michigan won 42-3.
Yep.
That's my pick.
I'm going to go Michigan over Wisconsin. I am going to take Wisconsin.
My lock is 72 points per game for Iowa against Western Michigan, Utah State, and Rutgers.
You've got Michigan. I've got Michigan. You've got Iowa. I've got Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Big Ten
All
West.
right.
Let us know. solidverbal@gmail.com is the email. Want to send a shout out to an email that we got here from Steven, who asked us kindly that we should not lump Indiana in with anyone during our preview to give them the lone spotlight for the 3 minutes we spend talking about them.
Okay.
Listen, Steven, I think I gave Indiana this too. I'm excited to see Indiana this year. I mean that genuinely.
Okay.
I think they'll be better.
Okay.
In fact, I'm picking them to go in the Big Ten. No, I'm not.
No.
I'm kidding.
What are you doing? Okay.
I'm not doing that.
Well, okay. What is the most likely Indiana upset? Right? That they were so close against Ohio State with Michael Penix. Give me Indiana shocking the world, beating.
Indiana would shock the world if they knocked off.
Is there a gumpiness quotient? I know I'm now asking you to go.
There is a
couple
gumpiness
steps.
quotient.
Yeah.
There is.
Where's their gump upset opportunity? Their gup set.
The Gump upset is Penn State.
Because Penn State plays who before or after Indiana?
Penn State plays Michigan a week after.
Okay, so it's a look-ahead spot for Penn State playing against Indiana. Where? In Bloomington or in State College?
It's in State College.
Okay. That's tricky. I like it, though, Ty. I like it.
Let us know. solidverbal@gmail.com. What's your pick for the Big Ten? Make sure you follow along on social media, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and, of course, subscribe to the podcast if you have to do so. Grand Total's the name of the over-under game that we're playing this year.
Yeah.
Verballers.com is where you go to sign up for that, Dan. We're up to 31 fascinating things about this Big Ten season. We've got the SEC, then we've got Notre Dame and the group of five to go. Keep it right here. For that guy over there, my good friend, Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt. We'll talk to you all next week. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace.